Hello everyone and welcome back to Genie Crafts. In today's video, we are going to see a very different form of string art, grid string art. So instead of regular string art where the nails are in a circle, for this string art the nails are in a grid, and this provides a much better and much more realistic output as compared to your regular string art. So the first step is to prepare the board. As you can see that I have a MDF board of almost 2 centimeter 18 thickness, and this board is very small. It's just 12-inch by 12-inch board. So the first thing that we need to do is to prep the surface of the board. So for that I am using this white gesso and a paint roller to actually coat the surface with white gesso layer, and I will have to repeat this process multiple times to ensure that there is a smooth white layer across the board. Now uh, you can use spray paint also here, but spray paint tends to leave a glossy surface whereas gesso will give a more matte finish, and for portraits I personally prefer a matte surface as opposed to a glossy surface, because glossy surface will give more reflections, which is not good from a portrait point of view. And also I'm not using a paint brush which I used earlier. For this I'm using a paint roller, as it gives a much more smooth and uniform textured finish, and there are no brush stroke marks on the surface after you are done applying the gesso. So repeat this process 2-3 times so that you have a uniform layer, and prep your board. So once your board is prepped and you check it for correctness and consistency and everything, once you are happy with it, the next step is to utilize the nail placement diagram to actually uh, pin the places where the nails are supposed to be hammered. Now as you can see that this nail placement diagram that I have created is in the form of a grid. I'll create a separate video on how to achieve such kind of nail placement diagram, because you can see that this is not a complete grid. The nail marks are only in that area where the photograph is supposed to be built. Rest of the places there are no nail marks. That means that there will be no nails on rest of the surface. And this was a very small board, so obviously you can see that the nail marks are quite dense to each other, but still there is, I think, at least almost 1 centimeter gap between any two nails adjacent to each other. And at the border of the nail placement diagram you can see that there are the numberings, the way you're supposed to follow. So if you look at this sequence carefully, what you will see is that at the top there is numbering from 1 to 30. So this is essentially a 30 by 30 grid. In total 900 nails could have been accommodated here, but we are only using 574 nails and not 900 nails. So at the top there is 1 to 30, and then on the right hand and left hand side you see the starting nail number and the ending nail number of that specific row. So let's say that on the second row the starting point is 31 and the ending point is, I think, 60. So in one row there are 30 nails, so it's a 30 by 30 grid, right? So 30 columns and 30 rows, and that's how you would read the nails also, because one of the toughest part of doing a grid string portrait is to identify which nail the thread is supposed to go. So let's say your template says that loop in nail number 408. How will you know where the nail number 408 is? So that's the method of reading the grid. So on the top it's 1 to 30, which basically tells you how much you need to add. So for example, if your nail is 68, then you go to row number 3 because the starting point is 61, then you add 8 and you reach 68. So that's how you read the nail numbers. In a separate video I will talk about how to actually read this kind of grid separately. As you can see that the nail marks are ready, and the next step is to actually put in the nails. So like as always I am using the cable clip nails because these are the best ones for me. They are smooth, they don't have grooves on their nail body, and it's easier to slide the thread up and down across the nail body, and they are quite pointy as well as hard nails to work with. So hammer in the nails on the positions which you have marked for your nails. Ensure that the nails are straight, and also that the nails are of equal height. It's important that all the nails should be of more or less equal height. If you have a nail gun to do that, even better. But normally for such kind of nails with which have heads on top of it, it's very difficult to get a nail gun for that. Trust me, I have searched a lot, I have not found it. So I have to do it the old fashioned way. I have to hammer in all the nails. That's why I always recommend use MDF board, because MDF boards are softer as compared to plywood as well as wooden boards, and it's much easier to hammer in the nails in the MDF board. As you can see that I am keeping paper under my hand uh, on the area where I'm on the area where I have not actually put the nails in. This is just to prevent the board from getting dirty or any marks appearing on the board, because once you have put in the nails you won't be able to remove any mark from those areas. You can remove marks from the areas where there are no nails, but definitely not from areas where there are nails. There is just not enough space for you to clean up anything. So hammer in the nails and ready your board. Once you're done hammering the nails, check from all angles if the nails are of similar height or not. Like I said, it's important, and you will see later on why it's important. But ensure that nails are more or less of the same height. Little bit here and there, it's okay, but there should not be drastic difference between the height of the nails. As you can see that I have attached the nail sequence on the corner, and we'll be following this nail sequence exactly like I explained before. So the top and the bottom is basically gives you the addition numbers, and the left and the right hand side numbers tell you the starting and the end point of a row. So that's very simple mathematics to understand which nail is where, and it takes a little bit of time to getting used to this kind of numbering sequence, but trust me, once you get a hang of it, it becomes very fast. So we are starting with the portrait now. We are going to build the portrait, and I'm starting with the black thread, as you can see. So tie the black thread at the starting point. Once again, you might be wondering from where I have gotten the sequence for these nails. So my own colored string program, which I utilize for colored string portraits, I have modified it to work for a grid also. So it gives you the nail sequence across the grid, and you just follow the sequence that the program has churned out for you. So there is no rocket science there, and continue doing it. At times you will see that some of the threads are getting on top of the nails. If that happens, you can just slide the thread under the nail head in such a way that your line of thread is not distorted too much. Uh, but even if it happens in the overall string portrait work that you will continue doing, this will not matter much, in the sense that because it's a grid, there are too many nails, there is a lot of sequence that you need to complete. So even if something goes here and there a little bit, it gets covered later on very quickly. It will not affect your portrait in any drastic way, or even in any minuscule way. So it will just get hidden, any mistake will get hidden eventually. It's just that when you are reaching the end of your template, that's when you really need to be careful, that you need to ensure that you are using the correct nail numbers, the sequence is right, you are not distorting your line of thread too much by pushing the thread here and there under the nail heads. But overall, for now, when you are starting the portrait, just follow the sequence and carefully do it. You'll you will also find that looping the threads in a grid is a little difficult as compared to in in a string portrait where the nails are on the circumference. Reason being, because when the nails are on the circumference, there is a space for you to move your hand to and fro across the nail. But here, uh, let's say that you are in the you are on a nail which is in the center of the grid. On all the sides of the nail there are other nails, so it becomes difficult to loop the thread across the head, so it's important that you do it slowly and carefully. It takes a little bit of time getting used to it. Also, if your thread is coming on top of the heads of other nails, you can leave it be. You complete one page of your sequence or 1000 loops. So what I did was that after every 700 loops, because my one template page contained 700 sequences, so after completing every 700 loops, I stopped. I cleaned the nail heads of the threads. I will show you later how to do it, and push the threads down, and then I started with the next page again. So like I said, it's a very slow process. Okay, so I have stopped after completing a page of sequence, and you can see that the threads are on top of the nail heads, and it's important to put them down under the nail head, because if you don't do it after every few loops, then this becomes a challenge later on, which I figured when I was doing at the start. I completed 2-3 pages and I didn't bother to put them down. So after a while the thread will start automatically unwinding from the nails because of the pressure the other threads which are on top of the nail heads are putting on the rest of the winding. So it's important to keep the nail heads clear, and I think this is one of the biggest drawback of a grid nail portrait, because my program, as well as there are some free programs for black and white string grid portraits, so even those, they do not consider sequence between the adjacent nails only. So the one nail can be at the bottom of your grid and the other nail can be directly at the top of the grid. So as you can see that I'm using a curved forceps or tweezer uh, to bring the threads under the nail heads, and then pushing the thread down also, because of the because in a grid portrait, the sequences are very large. Like normally in a string portrait you'll be done in 3000 4000 loops, but in grid portrait the loops go on for 15,000 16,000, sometimes even 20 25,000, depending upon the kind of portrait you're working. So the nail head gets crowded very quickly with the number of loops that are happening, and not all the nails will be crowded. Some of the nails will have more loops under it, some of the nails will have less loops under it, but it's important that you uh, push the threads down. So that's what I'm doing right now, that first I'm removing the threads from top of the nail heads, and the second thing that I'm doing is that I am pushing it under, pushing the threads from the top of the nail to the bottom of the nail, and this is an important step. Also be careful when you are using a tweezer or any such object to push the nails down, because these threads are very fragile. I'm using colored threads uh, of measurement tex 18, so that's like weight 100, around weight 100, and these are very fine threads and they break very quickly. So you have to be careful when you are doing this cleaning up of the nails, so that you can proceed with the next set of sequence in your template. The next biggest problem that you are going to face in a grid string portrait is what happens if the sequence for a specific colored thread ends somewhere in between of the grid. It's not on the edges of the row, or it's not on the last or the first nail in a row, but it's in somewhere middle. So what to do then? And there is no straightforward answer for it. It depends quite a lot where the nail ends. It's best if your sequence ends at the edges of the row, or at the topmost row, or at the or at few of the bottommost rows, but that will not always be the case. There will be cases when the thread is just the sequence is just going to end somewhere in between. Now if that happens, then what you need to do is that you need to find the direction in which there are least number of nails. So let's say that you end somewhere in third row, somewhere in between. So the topmost direction is where there are only two more nails, right? But the left and right will have a lot many more number of nails adjacent to that specific nail. So you just take the thread to the top direction and then stop it. So as you can see that one of the yellow threads at the top, I have just kept it outside of the grid, and similarly you have to do it for rest of the threads also. Like I said, no simple solution. Then you might be thinking, what if the other threads, the next set of sequences for other colors, overlap the thread, so that the thread that you have just put aside cannot start back from the point where it ended? So the answer to that is, because of the enormity of the total number of loops that are present in a grid string portrait, it's okay even if you do not start again from the last ending point. So you try to find the next best nail from which you can start that same color again, and you just pick it up from there. It's not going to change the output much, and I tried it in multiple permutations and combinations, and it's just the way you will need to work it out. There is no other solution for it. So if a sequence ends in between the grid, you find the direction where there are least number of nails, and there are only 4 directions that you have to consider here: top, bottom, left and right. So you find the direction and you simply make do with the closest nail with which you can start again, if you're not able to start from the last ending point. And the last important point which I want to highlight here is that you have to maintain sufficient tension in the thread when you are moving between the nails. Unlike regular string portraits, like a circular string portrait or a square string portrait, where I normally say that just maintain enough tension so that the thread is not slacking, but here I would say that just maintain enough tension so that the thread does not break. You have to keep the tension that much, so that the thread is just about to break, just below that much tension you have to keep in the thread. And the reason for that is because when you push the thread down after every few hundred loops, the thread becomes loose. And why they become loose? Because a lot of the threads will be going on top of the nail heads. Not all the threads will be moving just between the nails. Some of them will be moving on top of the heads, and while it doesn't seem much, but after few hundred loops, that amounts to extra length of the thread which has gone on top of the nail head. So that creates an extra length of the thread, which when you clean up the nail heads and push the threads down on the nails, at that point your threads become loose. So it's important to maintain enough tension in your thread when you are making a grid string portrait. And here we are at the end of the portrait. There were a total of 19 pages with 700 sequences on each page, so you can understand how many lines I had to build, but I decided not to proceed that far with it because by now the image has come out. Actually, it might not look that great in the video, but in reality when I see the portrait sitting in front of me, I could make out all the features clearly. There were some drawbacks of this particular grid approach, especially of not putting all 900 nails and just doing with the 574 nails. There were some issues there, but I'm still working on it. This was the first experiment, so I'm hoping that the next one will be much better. Actually, this was the second one. The first one I did on a 3 feet by 3 feet board with 1600 nails on it, and I just couldn't finish it because the kind of nails that I used in that were different than the ones that I'm using now. They got rusted and I had to stop the project in between. So for this one I had used lesser number of nails, smaller board as an experiment, and this more or less worked out. I'm at the finishing stages, just creating a sequence at the bottom right corner of the portrait, and after that it will be finished. Even if I had proceeded with the rest of the pages, it would only have improved upon the details that are already present in the portrait, but overall all the features of the face have come across, and it has actually come pretty nice. The problem that I faced was with respect to photographing it, because if you could see at the very start of the video, the photographs are not very nice because every time I'm trying to click a photograph, the nail heads are shining very much and all I could see are the nail heads and not the actual portrait. But in reality, when you look at it, you can see the actual portrait. So I'm still trying to figure out that if I should get rid of the nail heads by cutting them off or I should keep them. So maybe in a separate video I'll talk about it, but for now, that's how you build a regular grid string portrait. And I will post another video on how to do a black and white grid string portrait with a freely available option online on how to create the templates for such grid portraits. And for this kind of portrait which I have shown, I will make the option to purchase the templates available on my website very soon. Plus I will post separate videos on how to arrive at such kind of partial grid and how to create the nail placement for such a grid portrait and so on. So there will be some 2-3 more follow-up videos on this specific form of string portrait, and I hope you guys liked this video, found this interesting, and if you guys found this video helpful, please do not forget to hit the like button and share this video with your friends. And I will see you guys very soon in the next video. Till then, stay safe, take care, and bye bye.